surely the presence of the Lord is with us in this place. Surely the presence.
The wonder of presence. It's God came looking for us. That's the amazing part about Christmas. God came looking for me. God came looking for each and every one of you.
Amen.
It was in the person of Jesus. And that's the wonder of presence, I think. And a lot of people don't understand that. And a lot of people want to, like the pastor said, want to leave the presents outside of the door. I read a story about a man who was not a believer. But he was married to a woman who was a believer. They had children. And one night the mother and the children were going to go to church. And the man said, you know, this whole thing, God becoming a person, is ridiculous. I'll never believe it. The wife and the children went to church. A little later, a big old storm came up and the wind was blowing. It was snowing, blizzard-like snow. And the man was in the house and he heard something hit the house and he thought, what in the world is that? Opened up the door, looked out, couldn't see anything because of the snow, and thought, oh well, must be nothing. A few minutes later, the snow began to subside a little, and he looked out and noticed some geese. And 2 geese had hit his house. But there was a flock of geese just nearby in a little field of his. And he was worried. He thought, oh my goodness, they must have been flying south and got turned around, and now they're in my, snow-covered field. What am I going to do? He felt sorry for the geese, so he thought, I know what I'll do. So he went outside, opened up his barn door, and was hoping that the geese would go inside the barn. Geese wouldn't do it. So he thought, I'm going to chase them in there. So he ran over there, and they just darted here and everywhere away from him. He couldn't get them under control. He thought, I have a good idea. Went in the house, got some bread. Began to make a bread path to the barn. The geese wouldn't eat the bread. He thought, what? He goes, what am I going to do? He goes, if I was only a goose, I could probably get them in the barn. And then he thought, I know what I'll do. So he went to the barn, and he had a goose. He grabbed the goose, brought the goose out, put it behind the flock of geese, and he let his own goose go. And the goose immediately flew through the flock of geese and into the barn, and all the other geese followed the goose into the barn. And he thought, that's a wonderful idea. If I could have been, and then all of a sudden it struck him. That's how God was. God became a person so God could lead the lost out of the storms of life.
Yeah, and
The wonder of presence.
it is. And think about the guy that didn't have anything in your story. We've met people that said, do not talk about God to me.
Mm-hmm.
Do not talk about Jesus to me. I don't care if you're a pastor. I just don't want to hear it. What I know when I hear that, Mrs. Pastor and I, is that they've had some tragedy in their life they just can't get over. And they wonder, well, if there is a God, if there truly is a God, why did my baby die? If there truly is a God, why did my son or daughter die and mourn? If there truly is a God, why am I left with a debilitating disease? Christians, we're not brought to have everything be perfect. We don't. There are struggles. There are times that it seems real dark. Anybody known darkness? How awful it is till the next morning when the sun comes up and you wonder if you're going to make it. I've had those nights where I lay down and say, Lord, I want to come home to you. And when I wake up, in those times, I was mad when I woke up. I wanted some kind of spiritual suicide. And then I thought, but God knows that. God had a son. God gave that son to us. And God's son died. And the skies were dark. God knows about losing a child. God knows about having a rejection to his child. God knows about how that small child had to come to be on this earth to help those that had been lost and disheartened. It's kind of like instead of leaning back from the fire, you need to lean into the fire. In a sweat lodge, it's hot. You lean back, it feels like it might be hotter, but you go to the core of that, in that spiritual practice, to the core of the heat. And oftentimes we try to go the wrong way. We try to pull away from something that we need to go through. And it causes us all kinds of misery because we spend a lot of time trying to go over it, under it, around it, ignore it. And there it sits until we sit down and say, I'm going to drive through this problem with God. I'm going to drive through a problem with God. And again, I came to that place. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this house. Last Wednesday, I had to give some blood on Monday, and when I went in on Wednesday, they told me that my blood is way too thick. It was so thick that I could have a stroke. She said, keep taking your aspirin, don't miss it. I could have a stroke. I could have my kidneys shut down. I could have my liver shut down. Oh boy, was I discouraged. I thought, I just got everything changed, and now I'm not going to be able to take testosterone. And I thought it isn't an option. I looked at her and said, if you don't let me know within a week and a half, I'm taking a shot, because I'd rather die than slip back to who I was. I would rather die. I don't want to go back. You know, and so that night I went home, I was quiet the rest of the day here after I got the news, and the people that there, you know, loved me and prayed for me, and I went home and I was really quiet. You know, I went to bed at 10 o'clock and I didn't get up till noon. That's what slow blood does. It makes you hard. So I started to think about it, and Ricky had gone out and researched it, and I thought, oh, I know I'm dehydrated. I come here sometimes and only went to the bathroom once. Pastor Ricky's got 10. I haven't even gone one time. I'm like, ooh. Well, that's why there was that color. It was probably blood. So I started drinking and hydrating right away, and things started to happen. And then I talked to the doctor that works with this transgender folk, and she showed me the way. She said, we'll look at your blood. I was really discouraged. And if it's still thick, we'll do the patch. And I went, and I kind of came out of that fog. You know, but that was a very trying time for me to hold on to my faith. You know, taking that sign to mean something more than it is. And I've done that before because I know what happens when we get focused on something and we can't see the, you know, the forest for the trees. Mm-hmm. When there's something that gets so big in front of us, it just feels like it goes thump. That's what I'm talking about, trying to go over, trying to go around, trying to go under, some way that I don't want to walk through what the consequences might be. I don't think it's fair. Are you hearing words out of yourself? Surely the presence of the Lord was in this place for me. It was in Ricky, and it was in Catherine, and it was in Ellie, and it was in Justin. I had people around me that could see the discouragement. And Wednesday night, when we had the close of the service, I just asked Ricky to pray about his blood while we all held hands. You know, I'm trying to tell you, there's a miracle here. There's a miracle in this place. Each one of us are a portion of the miracle.
Absolutely.
We're in a portion. And I don't run away from the fire. When things are hard, run to your brothers and sisters. Get other people praying for you. Don't think you got to do it all by yourself because you're a Montanan. That's why we have so much suicide. Because we believe we should pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I know for a fact about being here that when different things have come on, even Carl's come over in a bad mood. Oh, he's in a bad mood, the whole world's wrong. And pretty soon, he starts to come within the spirit, and he sees what's going on, and we get to laughing, and we can lift each other's spirits. That's a dependent thing. We don't need anybody to crawl in the hole with us, amen?
That's right.
We need someone that'll throw a rope and then encourage us to crawl up off the rope.
Amen.
We can't get other people to do our spiritual walk. We gotta do our own and our own collectively. And the whole hope of this presence is the hope to put this light inside of you for all relationships, not just if you have a lover. That you're walking in that presence and knowing it's always there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Amen.
If we really believe that Emmanuel, God with us, then our responsibility is to respond to the presence.
Yes.
Jesus came to make God plain to us. In Jesus we see God's love. In Jesus we see God's grace. In Jesus we see God's justice. In Jesus we see God's holiness. And that's what it's all about. And sometimes we miss the mark. But hopefully during this season, especially with all these wonders we've been preaching about, we see the wonder of presence.
By the time I
God
rendered
with
that
us.
all down, I realized that presence is the same, or is linked to grace.
Yeah. You know, it goes back to that. I heard the story about a woman who was busy shopping. She's in a mall, had her arms full of packages. She got to the elevator. The elevator was full, but people made room for her to get on. And she got on, and she was just complaining and griping. And she said, you know, this holiday, whoever invented it, they ought to string that person up and kill him. A little voice from the back of the elevator said, they crucified him. But the wonder of presence says it all with that familiar verse that I think most of us know, John 3:16. For God so loved that God gave the Son, Jesus, that all of us might have everlasting life.
Amen.
That's the wonder of presence.
Amen.
The wonder of presence. Amen.
And the last thought I had is, you know, if you know me, you know I like the Christmas Carol, Scrooge. And I remember Cratchit coming home, he's turned to me on his shoulders and he says to his wife, he says, you know, Timmy says the most remarkable things when we're in church. Today he said, you know, I think it's good that I come to church and they see that I'm crippled, because then they will know that Jesus comes to the people that were crippled. It will remind them of who Jesus is. And all God's people said,
Amen.